Egypt is one of the most incredible and mysterious countries in the world. And when we think about this country, we envision the Great Pyramids, ancient treasures, exclusive beach resorts, a heaven for divers to explore the underwater world, and an era of a civilization that ruled the world in the ancient past. But just behind those great pyramids, there is another reality that many people don't know about. A shocking existence that is a prelude to a biblically proportioned catastrophe. In a few decades, the population of this country has quadrupled, and for many years now, Egypt is unable to grow enough food for its people. Egypt has one of the fastest growing inflation in the world. But what is the most terrifying thing about this whole situation is that the Egyptian leadership knows about this catastrophe coming, and they are preparing themselves to escape and leave the whole population to starve and die. And when we open the Bible, we will find echoes of what is right now happening in Egypt. The Bible has a lot of information that tells us about Egypt's past and Egypt's future. So let us look together and discover the wisdom that is accessible to everybody. If you study the Bible, there is no better place to be than in Israel. Just look at all those names of cities that we so often read in the Bible. Cities like Beersheba, Hebron, Jerusalem are places where key events, not just for Israel, but the whole world, have happened. And this narrow strip of land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River has always been important geopolitically. Empires throughout history fought for this land because it was a natural bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. According to the book of Joshua, this land was divided between the 12 tribes of Israel, which eventually led to the creation of the Kingdom of Israel with its capital in Jerusalem under King David. Then came its greatest period under King Solomon, which however did not last long because shortly after Solomon's death, the kingdom was divided between the north and the south, the Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Judah. Today, over 2,500 years later, we have the modern state of Israel. But in this series, I want to talk about the nations that surrounded Israel in biblical times. And so, we have the great kingdom of Egypt, we have Philistia, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Aram, and Phoenicia. On all of those nations, we can find interesting information in the Bible and historical records. But before we will continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that bell button. With that out of the way, let's begin our episode. So in today's episode, we will mainly focus on Egypt. And that's because Egypt is a major player on the scene when biblical Israel existed. And it really requires a separate episode to discuss Egypt's role in Israel's history. So in this episode we will focus on Egypt, and then we'll move on to other nations that surrounded Israel in biblical times. Now, despite the fact that the Great Pyramids still stand and remind us of the glorious days of Egypt, today's Egypt is a very different place from the biblical Egypt. And behind those great pyramids is the modern city of Cairo, which with its surroundings has a population of 22 million people. That makes Cairo the most populated and densely populated city in Africa. And just to give you a perspective, 1/5 of the country's whole population lives in Cairo. And this is very characteristic of Egypt. Despite being a large country, the majority of the population lives in the Nile Delta. And there is a reason why people live in this area. And the reason is that the rest of the country is a desert where life is very difficult and it can't sustain large populations. And Egypt would be fine if its population would be stable. But since the 1960s, the population of Egypt has grown from 27 million to over 110 million people. And again, just to give you a perspective, the whole population of Egypt lives on a territory smaller than the country of Estonia. And that's a big problem for Egypt. So to sum up, the population grows really fast and the space is limited. Egypt for a very long time is not capable of producing enough food for its people. We can see this on this infographic showing you Egypt's imports of wheat, and you can see how the imports of wheat has extremely grown since 2006. And that's not the only problem of Egypt. Not only they are importing more and more wheat because the population grows, but also the inflation is out of control in Egypt. So it means Egypt needs to spend more and more money to buy this wheat. Now this means that the people of Egypt will soon starve and die of hunger. It is a pending doom over this country, but it also reminds us of the story we read in the Bible. In the first book of Moses, we read of the story of the Pharaoh who had a very disturbing dream that he didn't understand. In this dream, as Pharaoh was standing next to the Nile River, he saw 7 cows coming out of the river. The cows were fat, slick, and healthy. But that was not the end of the dream. After the 7 healthy cows came 7 ugly and thin cows. And those 7 ugly cows started eating the healthy cows. So they were gone. And then Pharaoh had another dream, similar to the first one. But this time, instead of the cows from the Nile River, came 7 healthy heads of grain. But as in the previous dream, after the healthy ones came thin and scorched by sun unhealthy grain that replaced the 7 healthy ones. The interpretation of the dream was provided by Joseph, son of Jacob, who received insight from God. The 7 healthy cows and heads of grain represent 7 years of abundance that will happen in Egypt, where there will be enough food for everybody. But after those 7 years, there will come, as represented by the ugly cows and unhealthy grain, 7 years of famine in Egypt. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Egypt is quickly approaching a catastrophe where its people will die of hunger. Now, the rulers of Egypt know this, as Pharaoh knew what was coming. Pharaoh listened to Joseph, who was anointed by God to not only save the Jewish people, but also Egypt. But what are the modern leaders of Egypt doing to avoid this crisis? They know it's coming, like Pharaoh knew. Well, the president of Egypt began a massive project where he wants to build a new administrative center and the new capital of Egypt away from the old Cairo. And this new administrative center will be separated by a desert from the old Cairo. Only very narrow roads will lead to the new capital. Up to this point, all the government officials lived in Cairo, which is a highly dense populated area. And if there was a revolt, let's say because of hunger, the government wouldn't have anywhere to escape. But in this new administrative center where all the officials plan to move, they could just block all the roads leading to this headquarters. And it seems this is what the leaders of Egypt are planning. They're not planning to save their people, to gather resources, to think about the future. They're only thinking about protecting themselves. Will it work? I don't think so. But what we will see in the near future is a tragedy of biblical proportions in Egypt. Okay, but let's go back to Egypt's history and its connection to the Bible. Now, I will just mention basic facts that are important to understanding Egypt's role in Jewish Israel's history. And I will try to be brief, and this topic can be expanded and expanded upon. So Egypt is one of 3 regions where we see the oldest development of civilization. And in all of those 3 cradles of civilization, we see impressive buildings, structures that tell us of incredible skill and knowledge. In Egypt, we of course see the pyramids. In Mesopotamia, we see the towers to the heavens, the ziggurats. In modern-day Turkey, structures that we don't know even what they were, but we know they are very, very ancient. And in the middle of this, we have Jericho, probably the oldest city in the world. So, if you want to know more about human history, the beginnings of it, this is the region to study. Now, this region had a huge potential to develop because of the rivers, of which we read also in the Bible, the Nile River, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. These 3 rivers created the Fertile Crescent, which provided adequate environment for development. Now, if you look at this map again, you will see that the territory of today's Israel was, in the most ancient times, under the influence of Egypt. However, if we would go back in time, we would quickly see that this ancient Egypt is very different from the Egypt we know today. That Egypt in the ancient times was an empire that was on the top of the world, creating structures that we till today don't know how they actually built them. And because Egypt was such a great empire and controlled the territory we know today as Israel, this is why in the book of Genesis, the first book of Moses, we see so many references to Egypt. In the 12th chapter of Bereshit, Genesis, we read that Abraham, because of the famine in Canaan, travels to Egypt. Then we almost have a repeat of that situation where Abraham's son Isaac, because of famine in the land, goes into the direction of Egypt, stops at Gerar, a Philistine city, says that his wife is his sister, he is kicked out of Gerar and goes back to Beersheba. And then of course we have the story of Isaac's son Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. He is in Hebron and he says to one of his sons, Joseph, to check on his brothers who are tending the sheep near Shechem. So Joseph goes to Shechem. He finds out that in Shechem his brothers are not there, so he is directed to go into Dothan. And at Dothan his brothers see him approaching, when of course the brothers are jealous of him, so they first capture him, throw him into a cistern, and when the occasion comes, he is sold to the traders that are on their way to Egypt. However, when another famine strikes the land, Joseph's brothers are instructed by their father to go to Egypt to get some food. But the trip doesn't go according to the plan. The sons of Jacob are shocked to find out that their brother, who they have sold, is now a very powerful man in Egypt who can save the whole family of Jacob. But that's just the beginning of a very important story we will continue in my next episode. In my next episode, we will finish the information about Egypt. We'll talk about historical records as well as the information we find in the Bible, and we'll see how we can integrate all those informations. So make sure you stay tuned for this important episode that will publish probably in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for everybody who's supporting the channel. This is a huge blessing for me, and I'm so happy I can serve you in this way. If you think that my work is valuable, please consider supporting the channel. The best way to do it is through Patreon. I will leave a link to my Patreon page in the description. Also, make sure to sign up to my Telegram channel and all the other social media to stay updated on the work I'm doing. I'm creating new maps that I will be using in the future. I'm redoing the whole scenery of Jerusalem from different time periods, so that's also in works. And I'm planning to launch a new web page where you will be able to download some of the things I publish on my channel, so maps, models, shots of different views. So make sure to stay tuned for that too. Have a great day. I wish you all the best. Shalom.